do you think he was misunderstood?
Okay, so you have to press the rewind button on this question, and you have to go back to the structure of the chakras and how they operate in a human being. We are operating below par in the chakric structures of human beings today. For instance, Gurdjieff explained that we are a three-brained being. This is what he mentions in All and Everything, Beelzebub tells to his grandson. And what he meant by that is that the three main chakras in the human being should work together as one triad. But today they don't do that. They don't function as a triad per se. They function separately. And each chakra really does its own thing. And one chakra doesn't know what the other chakra is doing, doesn't know about the opinions of the other chakra. It's not aware of, for instance, the intellect is not aware of what's going on in the emotions quite a lot of the time with modern human beings. But what Gurdjieff's work teaches is to try and bring those three main chakras into alignment. So when we bring those chakras into alignment, what happens instantly is that we move from intellectual capacity to cognitive ability, which is very different. And this is a blind spot with modern psychology and modern academia. They don't really understand that intellectual capacity does not equal cognitive ability. So here's the caveat. A person can have a very high level intellectual capacity, I mean really high, can be a professor in university, a top professor, a tenured professor. But that person who has a very high intellectual capacity can have a very low cognitive ability. Most people don't understand this. And this is one of the key aspects of esoteric teaching. Because what happens with people who become very high in universities and students and professors and academics is that they develop the intellectual center, one center, but the other two centers are left behind. They're not integrated. But when you create an integrated triad of the three chakras together, you start to develop cognitive ability. And cognitive ability is way superior to intellectual capacity. So I'll give you an example of this. If you develop cognitive ability to quite a high level, you can take a book like the Bible, and you can open the Bible, and you can find passages in the Bible that actually make sense. You can actually put them together, different facets of the Bible you can put together into a bigger picture of what is being said. Whereas if you read the Bible from an intellectual capacity, everything is dispersed. You cannot see the connectivity that is there within that Bible. You cannot see how things are connected. You only see separate passages, separate pieces of text, which you cannot put together internally in yourself. So it's really not as useful. It's like, how would one put it? It's fragmented, that's the word. You will see it in a fragmented form. Everything is fragmented. But with a higher cognitive level, when you develop a higher cognitive level, you see the symmetry, how all of these things are connected. And you get the big picture of what Jesus was trying to say and what Jesus was doing with the disciples. And what Jesus was doing with the disciples is not what is preached in the church today. It's not the same thing. It's very, very different. Jesus was teaching very high-level materials, esoteric materials to the disciples. And he was giving them high-level esoteric modalities that are secret, that are not given out in society. The church do not possess these modalities anymore because the church has devolved into a very shallow religious teaching. But the core to the religious teaching belonged to Jesus and the disciples. And Gurdjieff explained that there are still schools on the earth today that have access to this core teaching, this esoteric teaching. And this is what is most important, to realize that the core teaching has never vanished from the earth, has never disappeared, it's always existed. It comes down through time in a line of successive initiates. And the Sufis, the greater Sufi tradition, call this the chain of transmission. And the chain of transmission is what Gurdjieff was seeking for with his band of friends, the Seekers After Truth, at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century. They had banded together to look and seek for this hidden tradition, this chain of transmission that he intuited definitely had to exist. And he was absolutely right, because at the end of the day, he made contact with this chain of transmission, and he made great use, because he had this natural ability to seek out arcane truth and arcane knowledge. And he had this natural ability to make contact with strange brotherhoods and secret societies and gain their confidence. And I think personally one of the reasons he had this ability is because he already had developed himself to a certain level. He already had hypnotic powers. He already had a great understanding of the arcane and the occult and the esoteric. So for him, getting insight and getting access to these different traditions, these brotherhoods, sisterhoods, and secret organizations actually didn't prove that difficult.
What is a resurrection? What's the real meaning of it?
Okay, so I think to answer that question, you have to approach it from a slightly different angle. And the angle is really the esoteric explanation of what happened with Jesus. So what the esoteric groups and the esoteric schools are telling us, after a fashion, is that it was known that Jesus was the avatar. He was going to manifest on the earth. But from my understanding of what Gurdjieff says about this, Gurdjieff says that he started off as an ordinary man with his history already written, so to speak. And he spent his early days with the Brotherhood of the Essenes. This is like common knowledge now. And then Gurdjieff explains that the missing 12 years of Jesus he spent in an esoteric school. And this is one train of thought that comes from the Gurdjieff materials and from other materials as well. That he spent a lot of time in an esoteric school and he developed to a very high level. And Gurdjieff explained that Jesus Christ was probably the highest master ever to appear on the earth. This is a rumor among his students and the lineage of his students that have come down. This has been mentioned that he made this remark, that he was probably the highest spiritual master ever to appear on the earth. But the key thing to understand about all of this is that all of the great teachers, the Buddhas, Mahavira, all of these great spiritual teachers, Jesus and a lot of others besides, including female Buddhas, they all came from the esoteric sphere of life. They all were products of esoteric schools. They didn't sit and meditate under the Bodhi tree like it's talked about in Buddhism, that the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree for a long, long time and eventually he became enlightened. Actually, the Bodhi tree is a metaphor for esoteric school. But very few people know this. So most of the great enlightened teachers who started religions, or religions came down from them in a diluted fashion, not their making, I might add, but the making of the people who came after them. These great teachers, they all emanated from esoteric schools. And Gurdjieff says it was the same for Jesus Christ. But the one caveat about Jesus Christ was this, that Gurdjieff said that Jesus was on the highest level that any Buddha, any awakened human being had ever reached, which was one level beneath the Absolute, one level beneath God, which was the zenith for any human being to obtain. It was the highest level any human being could go to in consciousness and power. And personally, I think that is probably true. That is very, very true. That Jesus probably was the greatest master that ever existed on the earth. But in some respects, that's not important. The more important thing is to understand how esotericism works, the modus operandi, the different levels. Because once we understand that there are different levels of development in the human being, and everybody wants to go to the highest level right away. Everybody wants to talk about Jesus or some of the higher, avatars or Buddhas. But Gurdjieff played this down a lot. He said, you have to start right now where you are. Don't fantasize about high spiritual beings and being one of these. You have to start where you are, which is quite low. You're on the physical plane. Your chakras are not even aligned. So you have to work at, first of all, aligning your chakras, understanding esoteric wisdom, and finding an esoteric group that can help you do real work in the real world, not in the imagination.
So would that make sense that Bible teaches that he was the Son of God?
Yes, in a way he was the Son of God, figuratively speaking. But the problem being in religion is that they see him as God, which is not true. He was not the Absolute per se. So in the sense he was the Son of God, he was very close to the Absolute. So his power, his making of miracles and his ability in miracles was on a very high level. Because he was on that level, which was just below that of the Absolute, he could manifest laws from higher in the universe, from a much higher plane in the universe, on our plane. And that is actually what a miracle is, to bend the laws of the universe and bring those laws from a very high plane into our plane, which is actually quite a low level plane. So once a miracle happens, and Jesus did these miracles undoubtedly, he was bringing other laws from higher planes into our plane, but he was doing that through his own power. Gurdjieff said that when Jesus performed miracles, he was using love and magnetism combined, these two elements. And he said that Jesus' power came from these two things, love and magnetism. And he said, when you accumulate this energy, this very special energy, which he had names for, which we won't go into today, he said, when you accumulate this, and this is what esoteric schools teach you to do, to crystallize and to accumulate these cosmic energies internally in the chakras, then you are like a huge battery, and you can dispense this energy at will. And this energy comes from very high planes in the universe. And so that is how miracles happen. Jesus could dispense this energy at will to heal people.